They should have said the poet. The poet. They should have said the poet. The poet.
Sending poets.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast about ideas. Our goal is to understand metaphorical truths within the beauty we find in the human experience. My name is John. With me is Bob. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, John.
And Tucker. What's up, Tucker?
Good morning, fellas.
And we are going to wrap up our conversation on the 2023 Holberg debate. Does consciousness extend beyond brains? Good stuff coming up here. So one of the things I wanted to start with that we hadn't talked about yet in the debate, there's a brief mention at some point, I think it's in Rupert Sheldrake's speech at the beginning, perhaps, but about the replication crisis. And I didn't know what that was, and I Googled it, and I didn't dig too much into it, but according to what I found, in 2015, 90% of findings in papers in prestigious biomedical journals couldn't be replicated. That's pretty interesting, right? So what do you guys think about that? Like, the way I interpreted it was all these things that have been maybe proven at some point or another, and things that maybe someone might read and go, okay, I can just assume that that's still true. I don't have to, recreate that and find that result for myself. I don't have to do that experiment myself. I can take this paper's word for it. 90% of things couldn't be replicated. Wow, right?
It's a little problematic.
Terrifying.
And again, I didn't dig into it, so I don't, out there, I'm sure somewhere it's here's the things, but just the percentage alone is like, wow.
I'll say two quick points on this, and I'll relinquish. First one, seems like the buzzword today is meta, meaning meta-analysis. So combinatory, they take many studies and then try to derive some sort of an understanding from multiple studies. I think that's kind of the future. Not a solution, but I'm just saying. Number two, I would say that, are these restricted to social sciences? I kind of recall that this was...
Yeah, I mean, it says biomedical journals, so yeah.
Biomedical, okay. I think, there's probably a definitional issue with the word proof. Like, is it a mathematical proof? Can we do that with experimentation? I disagree that we can. Empirical proof, what is that? It's like, let me. Well, I'll relinquish, but I just think it's probably a nature of the beast. Meaning, if we're talking about sociological things, human-based studies, what they're really looking for is a headline that says, study says, or whatever. That's the headline is going to be studies show, right? This is the part. They say studies show people named Tucker are, unlikely to live past 140. I don't know. I mean, right? There's something. There's some kind of like, okay, so what? But it doesn't have to be true science. It doesn't have to be replicatable. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It's part of a headline that's going to be inserted into a clickbait article that is driving views to prop up, advertising or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like it ties in a lot with maybe last episode or 2 episodes ago. We were talking about, sides of the story. The old adage is there's 2 sides to every story. I had been thinking, like, I think there's infinite sides to any story. But Tucker, I remember you said there's three sides, right? There's, person A, person B, but the third side is time, or the truth, I think is actually how you said it, right? The truth, which, time is such a factor there. So, okay, so like you said, Bob, maybe this 90% was based on, an algorithm that just looked through headlines and, wow, over the years. In other words, like, I think I can see it being very reasonable that a high percentage of things couldn't be replicated, because, dude, if the particular finding, the particular statistic is based on something from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, yeah, no shit, it's not the same now. Like, time is such a factor no one can escape. So the idea
Well,
that
what is proof? You can't proof that at this time in this place with these people you got this result. But that doesn't extrapolate to today's time, today's people, today's answers on a survey. I think that's your point. I agree with that, is that you're not really looking for a quote unquote proof. They're doing science with big air quotes. So it's not supposed to be able to be replicated. It's not truly science. They're not it's like a survey of today. It's like doing a map of the way the ground looks today. Doesn't mean the earth doesn't change mountains into deserts. It does, and the ocean, recedes and advances. But in today's day, this map is useful. I can follow this river to this, valley, and I can go camping. Doesn't mean it's going to be there a million years from now, or it was there a million years before. But today, but it's different than, like I said, like a mathematical proof, which is more like truth.
Well, in a little bit I did look into it, which was not extensive, but it did seem to lean more on the psychology side as opposed to the medicine side. But I mean, you see it in medicine too. It's like, this year, 1 glass of wine and 2 cups of coffee will extend your life by 10 years. And then next year,
right,
it will be the exact opposite. And it's just,
100%, 100%.
Looking at data that way, I don't think is useful, when I think we all kind of know deep down that eating a healthy diet is going to extend your life, and not eating a bunch of processed crap is going to be beneficial to you. It's
but let's talk about this. This is right to the heart of it, meaning I use that as a pun, like margarine versus butter. Like, one was thought to be, clog your arteries and you'll have a heart attack, and the other one was so good for you. So it used to be we had butter, and then came this margarine shit, and then that became the big thing, because then you don't have to eat the butter. But now, obviously, we're like, well, maybe not so fast, maybe not so fast. Maybe we should go back to the more natural product, and on it goes. Now we're in the realm of microplastics or whatever. Like, who knows? Honestly, who knows?
Yeah.
But
I mean,
our the fact is changing.
Yeah, and part of the thing that's changing is our physiology, right? That's not too out of the realm of
It's possible.
of truth there,
dude,
right? Like,
I think it's possible.
the fact that every single person on this planet has glycophosphate in their body, that wasn't a thing 100 years ago. Like, we're not the same. We're the same organism, but we're not the same. We're full of all sorts of.
There's a lot of epigenetics going on. So the expression of our genes does actively become influenced by environment, and it is passed down generationally. So we have a lot of interesting functions happening simultaneously. Obviously, look at just diet, right? What is this? Have you ever gone to like, those Plymouth Rock or something, like this old timey place from the first colonists and whatever? You go look at their little houses, go look at their little entryways, or go to Europe and like go to some Irish place or something, some little, and you got, the doors are like 55 inches or something. I mean, it's just like, so we're not different genetically in the last 200 years, obviously. That doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is diet and epigenetics.
Yeah, right. It's just part of the whole process there that change is just gonna it's one of the few things like I feel like I can be absolute about, you know.
Changes. Yeah. Well, but here's the point of it, though. The point of it all is humanity itself is a complex system. It's not going to be unraveled scientifically. So a complex system is not like a complicated system. Like a complicated system is like your car, okay? Because if the car doesn't start, is it your battery? Is it your alternator? Is it your starter motor? Is it your ignition? Is it? You have a million, but you can figure it out. Okay, it's complicated. Complexity, if I move one piece, like a neural network, 1,000 ripples will occur in unpredictable ways because ripples interfere with one another. And there's destruction and amplification of signal, all this crazy stuff. And so you get to this level of complexity like humans. I don't think you can call it science. I really don't. I think it's misnomered.
Well, it's certainly, challenging. It's in back to the debate. It seems like Anil, of the three of them, Anil seems the most passionate about trying to be as scientific as possible, trying to, he has, I feel like one of his maybe compromises was when he shared, I think it's a saying probably that floats around, but I hadn't heard it before, but take people's experience seriously, but not literally, whereas Tanya Luhrmann is like, yeah, take it seriously. I don't think she was saying also take it literally, but she seems much more interested in that gray area and maybe less in being able to reproduce and do things in the lab, as it were, right? That's kind of what I got.
She's doing the meta-analysis, right? She's exploring as an anthropologist 1,000 different cultures.
Yeah.
So she's not trying to be skeptical because she's in a given culture and she says, hey, I must be programmed by this culture. She's saying, let me just accept all the cultures and scan them all and find where they converge.
Yeah. Which I think in the beginning when we started talking about this, we all shared who we sort of felt like we related to most, or whatever, and that's one of the reasons I think I relate, or at least appreciate where she's coming from, because I think that's just kind of similar to my vibe. I think maybe in this complexity that we're talking about, it is. Bob even said, like, can you even call it science? It's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's just, oh man, it's got to take so much discipline to really try to be as accurate as possible and do these things in as controlled an environment as possible and really try to account for all the variables. Whereas, yeah, it's like, I don't know that I have that interest. I'd much rather spend that time focusing on which 17 syllables are the best ones for this haiku. You know what I mean? That's where like my energy is like feels my passion is or whatever,
I was just going to say though, John, the science starts with imagination. The science starts with a hypothesis. The hypothesis is imagination driven. It doesn't start with observation. It doesn't start with reality. It doesn't start with results. It doesn't start with conclusions. It starts with what if? What if this thing will happen? I don't know why, but what if? Well, what if it does? How would we test it? Well, this is a way we could test this what if. Well, then let's do it. And so that's the magic sauce, is it's both the haiku and the falsifiable experiment that is run based on, predictions made from the beauty of the haiku.
Beautiful. Well said. I think that kind of ties in here with this other point. We talked about scopaesthesia. There was another term Rupert Sheldrake mentioned, extramission, about the light or maybe a force not being something that only comes into the eyes, but also maybe something that goes out from the eyes. So I do have an update on this scopaesthesia experiments, the staring app on his website. We tried it last night. Almost forgot to do it. We were in bed. We were falling asleep. So we were already naked. So that worked out. but check this out. And, coincidence, sure. But if you remember the last time we tried it, Kim was sitting on a couch. There was stuff in between. When I told her like we should be naked to try this, she's like, "Why do we have to be naked?" I'm like, because there's nothing in between.
Science.
We got to try to eliminate if the hypothesis is that I'm emitting. In this case, she was staring. So if she's emitting a force at me, and I'm trying to tell if I can feel the force, then the less things in between her eyeballs and my skin where I'm feeling, the better, right? Like, let's start there. So she kind of was like, okay, I guess I get it or whatever. But anyway, but the first experience or experiment.
By the way, all teenager boys out there, that's a life hack. Okay, just FYI, that's a life hack.
By the way,
naked for science.
You're welcome. Okay.
Oh wow. Okay, thank you. That's. What if that comes back to us one day? Anyway, okay. So the first time we did it, it was both of us had, out of 20 iterations, 10 successful responses, 10 unsuccessful, 50% accurate, right? So last night, and it was just Kim looking at me because, again, we were falling asleep, and she's like, "No, that's fine. I don't want to be the subject," and I was fine. That was cool. Just doing the one experiment where I was the subject. She's looking at my back. I was 70% accurate.
Wow.
Yeah. So what does that tell you?
Huh.
Coincidence? Sure, maybe. But also, there was nothing in between her eyeballs and my skin except the air, right? But
yeah.
And I was 70% accurate. So you know what? The last thing I'll say real quick. Let me just wrap this up real quick. I realized during the experiment, and I didn't want to restart it or ruin it, but I was like, I bet that if we had decided, basically the app is telling you to do one of two things: stare at the person or not stare at the person. And so I'm imagining whether she's staring at me or not. But if she's not staring at me, we didn't establish like where would you be staring. And my point is, like, the possibilities where she could be staring are so endless that I decided, if we do this again, we have to decide that if you're not staring at me, then you're going to be staring at this thing, so that I can know it's very binary. I think I would do even better. That's my hypothesis, that I would do even better knowing that right now she's either staring at my back or she's staring at this thing, versus she's either staring at my back or she's staring at 100 other things that she could be staring at. So we'll see if we do it again, but that's my hypothesis, that I would do even better.
I hope you guys do, because what I like is the evolution of the experimentation process itself. I think it's fascinating that you're customizing as you go and trying to eliminate, some variables, right? And try to streamline the process and try to get to the essence of the thing. I think that's actually beautifully representing real science.
So
you have an N of one though, but that's a problem.
Yeah.
Were you sitting down while you were doing this?
No, we were laying down. We were laying in bed, and so I was on my left side and she was on her left side, and she was, 2 feet from my back at most, less. So she was very close also. So that's another variable in there. How far?
Yeah.
I think you need to refine this, because you were so close that she could probably only, look at 70% of you, and that's why you only got 70%. So next time, I think you should be blindfolded, butt naked, Superman pose, standing far enough away that she can see all of you.
Yeah. Yep. Nice.
Because you're the antenna,
The control is just John in a room by himself, Superman posed naked on the bed.
I'm ready. See, Kim, I love her. She I can appreciate that, even though I just thought of this, but I thought of it. We talked about this before too. I thought of her saying this in my head. I imagined her saying this, that, she'd be like, "Okay, you're ready. Okay, see ya," but not let me know. And I'm just standing there like, "Are you doing it?" And I'm just standing there in this pose, like, "Where'd you go?" It's like written in a TV show. Like, that would be funny.
Yeah, I do have a callback though with your results, and the callback is to Rupert's experiment with the phantom limb, in that I think we all posited it was probable that whoever is that close, even though there's like a wall, so to speak, between you, you might be unconsciously sensing, meaning hearing or feeling or some kind of vibration, some kind of low frequency, like you kind of understand there's another person over there.
Yeah.
And your gut tells you, say thumbs up for this one, and you don't know why, and you do it, and then after the fact, oh yeah, it was the phantom limb, that was what I was keen on, or whatever. So I'm saying, when you're like really close in bed, maybe even just like blinking or turning your head slightly would give you some kind of an unconscious cue. Just FYI.
Mm.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
True.
Again, so many variables. It's a fun thing, but it particularly the experience with his website. It's fun, but I think Bob, you made this point last time. Like, I'm sure he's got those results separate from his actual ones in a lab, much more controlled. And when he's talking about his, his whole point is when you do these tests in a controlled, it's way more than just average coincidence by guessing. There is some that's his point. There is
I think he said the
there.
phone call one was like 60% or something, right? The phone
Yeah.
call one, where it could be 25%. So yeah, I mean, I think there's enough. This is what drives the experiment, because like if it's always the same, no matter what you do, none of the variables matter or whatever, you just give up. But as you start tweaking it, and you're like, well, maybe this is working, but maybe it's because of this or whatever. I think that's the evolution. So you got to get some kind of an interesting result, and then use that to step into the next iteration.
Mm. Yeah.
And the flip side of real quick, and the flip side of your customized N of one, but thoughtfully evolving and iterating process would be many people just kind of randomly doing it, or doing it half-assedly or something, but doing it in the millions or the tens of millions, such that you can detect some kind of corollary pattern in the giant data set. And then it goes back to the meta-analysis and all this. So I think that the two ways to go about it: very properly, precisely evolved, so your feedback is prompting your next iteration, and then just doing a giant, long-term, large scale, N of 10 million or something, and then trying to find some deep pattern in that data that can't be mucked with. Like, it's just a lot of information can be gathered that way.
Yeah. Does this kind of tie in a little bit? Maybe I think, Bob, you maybe made this note about virtual images.
Yes. So
did you want to talk about that a bit?
And to the point of, I wanted to talk about like the evolutionary component, meaning we've been talking about the projection. This is hypothetical. This is devil's advocate. So why would it make sense for someone to have a projection capability through their eyes and a detection of that? And it makes a lot of sense in that if you could feel a predator looking at you, you would have even if it's unconscious feeling, like even if you do not consciously perceive this feeling, it guides your unconscious decision making, and then your consciousness will rationalize after the fact. Doesn't matter what story you make up, but it would be hugely influential for any prey species. Okay, and there would be a inherent desire, unconscious evolutionary desire for predatories to hide this power, or to prevent this power from being detected. So there'd be like a war game, evolutionary war game. And so part of evolution, we can look at examples of this, and it would be like humans evolve, and all animals on Earth have evolved such that any image we see, we propose unconsciously that the object is behind the image. Because nothing in nature have we experienced in an evolutionary sense where it's adaptive to propose that the reflection of the thing is not in front of the thing itself. So you get tricked looking into a mirror because it looks like a projection into the mirror, behind the mirror, and it tricks your brain, but it's consciously, there's nothing behind the mirror. But you can't help but focus your eyes through the mirror and change depth in the mirror. Rainbows are also an example of this, where you see the rainbow in front of you, but the sun is behind you. So what you're seeing is the sunlight being curved through the water droplets and coming back at you again. So the light source is behind you, but you see the rainbow in front of you. So these virtual images are very deceiving. And I would say that it's an example of evolution going towards the most common solution. So even though it's not the truth, so to speak, it feels better to assume that the thing is behind the image. There's really no evolutionary advantage, even though it's not always true. You can have reflection, and you can have refractions. They exist, okay? Reflection and refraction exists, and it's powerful. Let me give you an example, thought experiment. So you're on a bridge, and you have a bow and arrow fishing rig, and there's fish underneath, and you keep shooting at the fish, but you always miss. And you're an expert archer. But one day this guy walks on the bridge. He's like, "Can I try?" He's like, "Yeah." And he shoots and he catches a fish. And the guy's like, "What in the world? What in the world? How is this possible? I've been fishing all day and I hit my mark every single time." And the guy's like, "Well, I'm not really a good archer. I just kind of get near it. And I think I just shot that a little high." So the expert takes his bow back, does it 2 inches above the top of the image of the fish, and he shoots. There's the fish. He gets it. So the answer is, what we see, literally see, not a hallucination, we literally see an image, a virtual image of a fish. But because of the refraction property of the light going from water to air, the image of the fish, just like when you take a pencil and you put it in a glass of water and it looks broken at the water line.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So there's a literal, I'm literally seeing the photons of this thing. But then the truth is, this thing is in a different position. It's not really where you see it, even though you are literally seeing it where you see it. You're not faking where you see it. You're literally seeing it where you see it. But that's not where it really, really is.
That just happened to us yesterday. We went to the Denver Aquarium, and there was, a tank thing, and it had these things called four-eyed fish that I probably should have looked at a little closer, because I don't feel like I know enough to say exactly what they were, but they looked like they were kind of floating near the surface, and it reminded me of a alligator or crocodile. But the nostrils of the alligator or crocodile, that was its eyes. It was at the end of its if it didn't have a snout, but that's where its eyes were. And I think they're called four-eyed fish. I could totally be wrong here, but I think it's called four-eyed fish because it is sort of an optical illusion. And what was neat about it is it's just like the broken pencil thing. Just it's exactly what you're talking about, Bob. You can stand up against this tank, but it's like a half wall. You can see the surface of the water. You can walk up to it, and the surface of the water is there, and then you can kind of crouch down and look through the glass and see the water. And it was that same thing that with my eyeballs looking on the surface, I can see that the fish is right in front of me. But as I look down and look through the water, he's shifted over to the right, 8 inches or something. And it's oh, that's another one. That's a different fish. But then you look and there's no other fish, and you look back up and oh yeah.
They're both real. Only one is true. See what I'm saying? Both are real, but one is true. And so this goes back to the possibility of, hey, we see a thing. We've evolved to see a thing a certain way, such that light only goes in our eyes. It doesn't come out. But are we looking at it the right way? And let me give you one last example. Einstein, general relativity, curvature of space-time, predicts that you can see behind a star because of its gravitational lensing effect. The star blinds you because it's so bright, so you need an eclipse. But with an eclipse, you should be able to see something behind the star, physically behind the star, that has been bent and warped through the curvature of space-time, so that it appears as if it's not behind the star, but next to the star. Behind it, but to the side, so to speak, so you can actually see it. And this was proved correct. So things like this, where you shouldn't be able to see this thing. It's the inverse of the refraction, meaning it's hidden until you see it, because the curvature brings it into your vision, but it's technically behind the star. So the real position of the object behind the star is literally behind the star, but we can see it bent around the star because of the gravitational effect, the lensing effect of the star, but only when the brightness is diminished. But this happens in galactic scale as well. You could have a galaxy bend the light behind it and make magnification happen at cosmological scales, and then also the creation of multiple effects. So you can get duplications and tripling and quadrupling of these images through different lensing actions. The point is, though, just because you've evolved to see the one thing doesn't mean that's really how it is.
By the way, that's probably not one of the things I'm supposing here that's in the replication crisis, right? That's still like that what you said. It's been kind of proven, like when the light is diminished, you can see something behind it. And by the way, the replication crisis again, it said it was in biomedical journals, but that seems like something that.
Well, no, the physics has been confirmed quite a bit, and there's essentially the physics is different. In that one instance of it being incorrect is enough to disprove it. This is the difference between like a sociological thing, where it's more of like a spectrum of effect. You can say, half the population will choose this option, or whatever. But in physics, like if you get a result that doesn't confirm the thing, that's a huge, just one, as long as it's true, that's a major problem.
Yeah. So I want to go, staying on this thing about the fields. One of the questions I asked in one of the previous episodes was when Rupert, I believe, was the one that was talking about, MRI machines and being able, or actually it was Anil. Sorry, I think it was Anil that was talking about there is electromagnetic energy coming through the skull, and you can, measure this with machines. And I had suggested, well, what if consciousness itself is just a different kind of field and we don't know how to measure or perceive it yet? But Tucker, you had some thoughts here.
Well,
I want
to play a little bit of devil's advocate on what Bob was saying about the whole evolution thing. I could see it that, okay, if there is this ability to sense when a predator is staring at you, then the successful predators are going to be the ones who don't bore into that prey object. Maybe they're looking at its feet. And so over time, not only has that been less of an issue for the predators, but it's also been less of a benefit to the prey, where maybe that was a sense that was more developed earlier on, this feeling of somebody staring at you. But as the predators learned not to stare directly at the prey object, but just near it.
But what if the signal is unconsciously sent and received so that there's no adaptation on the behavioral side? Like they don't detect that they're doing it or that it's being done. They make up a reason for why they ran away. And it wasn't that this thing was looking at me. It was that I heard a mouse fart in the distance, and I just so I'm saying, like, it could be. And by the way, I thank you for the devil's advocate. I appreciate that. I'm not proposing this either. This is just thought experiment stuff. I don't believe in that. This is but I love the idea. I think working into the prospect of an evolutionary example of how this could be beneficial, I think that's super interesting to me. Like trying to detect, why would somebody create this idea? Why would other cultures have this universal concept, let's just say, of the soul, or being able to do this thing? So I'm trying to give just like what was the lady in the middle position?
Tanya Lerman.
Yeah, I think she has that ontological neutrality. I think it's really powerful. It's really powerful to be able to see a pattern for what it is without shaping the pattern in your prejudgment.
And I could even see it from the opposite perspective, where just us as humans, you get a feeling that somebody's staring at you. So you turn your head, and the act of you turning your head catches somebody's attention, and they look at you. And when you turn your head and they're looking at you, you're like, I knew it. They were staring at me. But that's not what actually happened.
That's a good point. So you have to make an experiment. You have to literally do the app and all that stuff.
Well, here's another experiment we just did Friday night when I was trying to convince Kim to get naked and try this thing. But with the app, or the website. But we were on the patio, and there's windows in the wall of the house that the patio is adjacent to, and it's like two windows. There's a vertical crossbar. So it's two separate windows, but looks like a big window, right? And So inside the house, on the other side of the window, our Jay is sitting there. Our son Jay is sitting there on the couch, looking at his phone, and I'm looking at him through one of the windows, and Kim is looking at him on the right side of that vertical crossbar through the other window, and we're like, "Ooh, let's just stare at him. Let's just stare at him intently until he looks at us." And 20 seconds went by maybe, and he wasn't looking at us. And I was like, "Wait a second." I told Kim, I was like, "Step to your left, come next to me so that we're both looking at him together through the one window. We're like focusing our energy together." And I swear to God, the moment that Kim got close to me and our lines came, he looked up at us and we were like, "Oh, it worked." But that's kind of what you're saying. Like, I don't know, coincidence, you know?
let me dovetail off of that back to the, so we were also going to do an experiment. I went to a theme park, Universal
Yes.
Studios theme park.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
And I tried this concept of, staring a lane or something, like making some kind of an uncomfortable beam or whatever. I didn't get any result. I didn't get any result there, but I do want to reinforce what Tucker was saying. Okay. Because here's what happens. You're in a sea of eye lines.
Mm-hmm.
But you're like randomly scattered. Your waves are all on different, you're talking to your significant other and your kids, and you're looking at the sign and the TV and this thing over here. But every once in a while, you will randomly lock eyes with somebody else out there, and it is different. It feels some kind of like boom, because when I say lock eyes, I don't mean that you just kind of like see them looking in your direction. I mean, your eyes are connected, and there's something there. Okay, I don't know what it is, but when there's a feeling there. Okay, there's a feeling of recognition, like a surprise moment, because you're looking through, and there's literally 1,000 people are all around you. 1,000 people, and they're all looking in different directions all at the same time. And coincidentally, or they were staring at me first and I just happened to look over, or whatever, they caught me staring at them, whatever. There's this weird recognition moment, and it feels like something. So that's what I'll say. It feels like something, but I don't know.
No, I would agree, man. They call it locking eyes with somebody for a reason, and it does, whether it's a feeling or if it's an actual transfer of information. It feels like there is something communicated when that happens.
Yes.
So Bob, I have to ask you though, like,
it's powerful at the evolutionary level. I would almost the hairs go up on the back of your neck kind of a thing.
Yeah. So in your experiments of the lane, I like how you described that, trying to emit this single lane. What were you able to, shut down any instinct to make eye connection? Because the whole point of it is, once you make eye connection with somebody, you've broken that lane. The whole theory here, I think, is that if you can avoid eye contact and have a single lock on your destination, that's the thing where people will just kind of part the ways, like you're parting
here's
them.
The thing. It's a double layer experiment, and for this I apologize, but it's combining the looking at the back. So I didn't have an experience where I like psychotically looked forward and like marched ahead.
I like how you added that adjective.
I'm sorry,
or adverb, I guess, right?
I'm just not that. I'm just not that guy. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just not that guy. But I did do this. So let's just say there's a boulevard, and on the right hand side, there's everybody walking south, and on the left hand side, it was walking north or whatever. There seems to be like a natural dispersal pattern. So you flow like a fluid with your side, because obviously it's less cumbersome than trying to fight people coming. Anyway, my point is, if I do look and try to lock into the back of people to get them to feel uncomfortable, because my proposition was it shouldn't matter if it's a subconscious feeling. They're not really detecting it. They're not watching me watch them. They're just feeling some kind of way when I intently stare down the lane or something. And my point is, nobody ever parted for me. Never once was there like, the Red Sea dividing or anything like that. It was all just a random people walking in front of me, shuffling along, holding hands with their kids. And I never felt any connection, nor did I feel an effect. I didn't feel like anything happened different than what I've seen every day of my life when I walk behind people. So
sounds like you got to try it again. Oh,
so
I could try it again.
My own observation, and I take like concert crowds to be the perfect example. I think the crowd is steered by the tall people, and that's because they can see the whole picture. You know, if we're trying to get through a crowd, I don't ever put my wife ahead of me and go, make the path.
Yeah,
Because
gotcha.
she's shorter than most of the crowd. Like, I walk in front of her and I weave my way through the crowd and she just follows me. And if you look at the crowds, it's usually that way. You know, the tall people are kind of weaving and there's little people following behind them.
That's
So
fascinating. That's fascinating.
here's a Dune Part 2 tie-in. Jamis would say the best hunter climbs to the tallest dune before he starts the hunt, so he can see.
No, I
You
think
know?
that's it. I think that is it. You would navigate by who can see, because if you can't see, you're just
Yeah.
following. You're not really navigating. You're following.
Yeah. And it works in almost every crowd we're in until you go to Amon Amarth shows and it brings out every 6'7" Viking in a 200-mile radius, and I'm just as lost as everybody else at that point.
Yeah. Good point. So yeah, Tucker, I don't know. I just really like what you wrote in here. I mean, I can read it if you like, but it was about the higher dimensions. If there's higher dimensions, our brains somehow using them in ways we can't detect. Maybe. Do you remember that? Do you want me to just read what you wrote here?
Yeah. I think I can just kind of summarize off of what I wrote, but I mean, there are scientists who believe that our brains are operating on some sort of quantum level. You know, it's not necessarily just a physical phenomenon as we know it. And to me, if that is the case, where we're interacting with a dimension beyond the third, I don't know that we'll ever have that aha moment of we found consciousness, because anything that exists on a higher dimension is not something that we can physically view as it is. You know, if that's the case, there's never going to be an MRI machine that finds consciousness in the brain because it exists outside of it to some degree. And I think that's kind of what they're getting at. A couple of the speakers is that there are these things that are happening beyond the physical confines of our brain that can't quite be explained. And if that's the case, then I don't know that we'll ever have that answer or that equipment to find that answer.
Yeah, and you proposed here that, well, so if we're seeing something, well, maybe it's to go back to Carl Sagan and his video on YouTube, you can find about Flatland, that you don't see the tesseract, but you can see the shadow of it. That maybe that we're detecting the shadow of consciousness. You know, so I really like that idea.
I mean, we can get the idea of what it is, but we'll never be able to scientifically set that paper on the table and say, this is what consciousness is. We found it.
Here's the two future what ifs, I would say, off of the truth that you just said, which would be, number one, I think better ability to use, say, MRI or some new tech, and then animal models, something that's analogous to humans. I just don't think we're going to cross the line and start dicing up human brains. That's probably what you need to do to get to the real understanding. But rhesus monkey, something like that's probably going to get thrown in some crazy MRIs here in a minute. Number two is artificial intelligence, and therefore artificial consciousness, perhaps, and being able to create an analog to what we experience, what we're talking about, but synthetically through silicon and electrons and stuff like that. So I'm not saying either of these will happen. I'm just saying I can see a path forward in the future, perhaps, presuming this is, something at the quantum level that is not going to be directly observable, but, maybe indirectly or through an artificial analog, we can get to the truth.
Yep, I'm not saying it's impossible. I think that's a trap that we've fallen into too many times as a species, and we've proven ourselves wrong many, many times. So I don't like
great
the
point.
world impossible, but there's
is-
definitely a roadblock there.
This is a very powerful concept, by the way. This is something Richard Feynman has an amazing quote. Physicist Richard Feynman: "Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts."
Wow.
It's a tough pill to swallow until you realize all progress is made by the previous generation being wrong.
Yeah,
and some
right.
new generation saying, you know what? I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to believe what you tell me. So science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. That's what gets us moving forward.
Wow.
Put that in the show notes, by the way. I live by
Yeah.
that quote. By the way, Richard Feynman, we got to do an episode on this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to have to do an episode on this guy.
I
There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, I think my first exposure to him is in the movie Tenet. There's a line about Feynman and Wheeler's notion that a positron is an electron or something like that. And I was like, who are these people? And because I wondered, did Christopher Nolan just make up some names? No, yeah, Richard Feynman. And then Richard Feynman, the character, is in Oppenheimer. Dennis Quaid's son plays him.
I haven't seen the movie, but he was in the Manhattan Project as a young man.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Right. He was playing bongos. I don't know if that was
that's
based
true.
on real thing. He
No,
was a
that's
bongo guy.
100%.
Yeah. So that's in Oppenheimer's. That's great that they,
Dude,
kept that.
he was a bongo playing fool, man. We'll have to save it for the episode, but he's a curious cat. I think you can learn a lot of stuff from understanding him if possible.
Yeah. Say again, the science is the belief in the ignorance of experts.
Yes.
Nice. Excellent.
And that's such it's such a powerful quote, but it's also such a double-edged sword, because it's what progresses science, but it also is what allows certain segments of the population to go, the Earth is flat. NASA lied.
Yeah, no, I was
It's
wondering if I was gonna bring that up, so I'm glad you did. But yeah, get on TikTok lives of people debating the shape of the Earth, and that's one of the go-tos. It seems like for flat earthers is just like, well, that's just what NASA told you to say. You know what I mean? And it just,
Well, there is. Here's what I think about the flat earthers. I put some time into this. Here's what I think. Are you guys familiar with the stock market at all?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys know what short selling is?
Yep.
Okay. So you're making a bet that the price of a thing will go down. And so what I see with flat earthers is they're playing this Cartesian crisis game where nobody can come up with how you are walking through the world making decisions without primary knowledge of anything. You have not really been the primary measure of any fact that you know, hardly any. I mean, maybe your height and your weight or whatever. But I'm saying in the real world, we take for granted how many other people have done the experiment, how many other people have run the study, how many other people have made the observation. And then this gets shared. So the information system is advantageous in that we don't all have to measure the thing.
Right.
We share this information, but becomes a crisis and Cartesian is Descartes. So Descartes realized, I have no primary knowledge of anything. How am I a philosopher? And I don't know anything primarily.
Yeah.
And so he had this crisis, and then it's, I think, therefore I am. I mean, that's the base, is like, I just am existing because I have consciousness. I can think, therefore I am. But I can't prove anything else. Like everything else is somebody else's telling me this thing is happening. So my point is, the flat earthers are trying to push back on appeal to authority. And they're like, no. I don't want to hear your words on why. I want it to be to my satisfaction. I want to know, and I think most of them are trolls, obviously, but I'm talking like the.
I was going to say that sounds like a pragmatic. Again, like some people just want to watch the world burn. Yeah, that's out there too. No, but yeah, no, I love it. Yeah,
what I'm talking about is because the trolls are not smart enough to come up with the idea to start. Like there was somebody really in there, I think, who was trying to put an eye into the appeal to authority. They were trying to thumb their eye into the appeal, like the experts. Yeah. Experts. Fuck you. I want to know it my way. You got to explain it my way so I understand it. If I don't understand it, then it doesn't exist and I'm going to believe it's flat or whatever. And so I think there is some tension there. I'm not saying at all, obviously, that the earth is flat. I'm not saying that these people are credible. I'm just saying short sellers impacts price. And there's a discovery mechanism of the market that gives us price discovery, which is extremely difficult to find, and it's valuable. So just in for what it's worth, there is potentially some value to skepticism on an irrational basis.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think Carl Sagan would say that about the importance of being skeptical and everything. Again, one of those things, like if Carl Sagan was still alive now, what would he say about this surge, kind of that I don't think existed before social media in the way it exists now. I don't know. I'm sure there have been flat earthers all along, but just the way I'm exposed
John,
to it.
I would love to do an AI training to make it simulate Carl Sagan and ask that question. I'm not joking. That's a really cool question.
That sounds like a worthwhile endeavor for sure.
for sure. Because he was such a great science communicator. It's not just like, because I'm curious. I'm really curious what his answer would be, because I think he would think about it in a multifaceted way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he would be, obviously counterintuitively as a cosmologist, but maybe he would be someone who could see the value in the interest, like the attention. It's drawing attention to the science. Now, it's misguided in that they're trying to invalidate what has been, I would call, proven.
Yeah.
And not just proven a little bit. Okay. I mean, we're talking close to math proof. Like everything's a sphere out there. There's a reason why gravity's attracting these things in a spherical manner.
Yeah.
Period. It's just like, that's just, it is like, put
a
drop of water in space. Put a drop of water in space. What shape is it? It's a sphere. Okay. Case closed. There we are.
Yeah. And it's not like because NASA said, I mean, there's
every heavenly body you can see is a motherfucking sphere. Okay. Yeah. Show me one flat heavenly body that's not on Earth, because we can all look out. Their proposition is we can't look back on ourselves. I think that's interesting. But we can look at the moon. We can look at Jupiter. We can look at the moons of Jupiter. We can look at Saturn. We can look at the sun. We can look, right? All these things are spherical. So, what counterfactual is in place other than mind control or something on the Earth planet that makes us any different?
Yeah.
Because we're special.
Yeah, right.
So another piece here as we're kind of wrapping up. I don't think we specifically talked about the term panpsychism, but it's mentioned in the debate several times, and it's this view that all things have a mind or a mind-like quality. The word itself was coined by the Italian philosopher Francesco Patrizzi in the 16th century, so that's a long time ago. But it's from the two Greek words pan, meaning all, and psyche, meaning soul or mind. And again, Tucker, you added something to the agenda that I really appreciated, the imagery. If you don't mind, maybe digging into that. And again, I'm happy to read. The last part there is just this beautiful image you painted.
I just kind of, I do like the idea that life is all kind of interconnected, and in some ways, part of me feels like we're all connected in ways that we don't fully understand. And I think in the more recent years, I've become much more open to the idea that we are not necessarily in the universe. We are the universe, and we're just kind of experiencing ourselves through our own little lens. And so I kind of had the idea, if you look at octopi, they have a central brain, but then each of their tentacles also has its own brain-like structure that kind of gives it independent control. Now, they can all be controlled by the mother brain, right? But each limb can kind of control itself. And so I kind of like the idea, not as in I believe this, but just the idea that the universe is the mother brain of the octopus, and we're all just kind of these little tentacles that have our own free will. But then there's times the universe needs to make something happen. It needs all of those limbs with their independent brains to snatch up that fish and shove it in the beak, right?
Yeah.
And so for that instance, those limbs no longer have that free will. And so, you could expand on that further and say, we all do have free will, but we all may have a larger purpose that we don't understand. And it could be something very insignificant, but the universe as a whole needed you to be in this one spot at this one time and perform this one action that you never even thought about, never gave a second thought to it after that event happened. But it was very necessary on a larger scale for the universe to make this, whatever its end game is, to make that happen.
Yeah, I love how you in the agenda you said once we snatch that fish and shove it into the maw, we go right back to flailing our tentacle however we want, dude. Fucking poetry, my friend. I love it.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting image to contemplate. So yeah, well done.
Beautiful metaphor, very poetic, and cannot improve upon that. That is beautiful.
Yeah, excellent. So the other piece that wasn't in the debate, and Bob, I know you thought there was maybe a specific reason, but you came across this article from The Guardian yesterday or Friday night maybe about near-death experiences. So really fascinating article. I think we have a lot to say there too. Just doing a time check here. We're almost at an hour. I'm still cool to dig into this, but I know we also wanted to kind of do a kind of mock debate ourselves. I'm wondering if we should make a decision here. Do we stick with the near-death experiences and kind of final thoughts of the debate, and then the next episode pick up with the kind of mock debate on the consciousness subconsciousness factors? I feel like we're going to talk a lot about that, so I'm kind of wondering if there's enough time to do both. What do you guys think?
I would say you got to pick one or the other, and then I would also say I think near-death experience could be its own thing, and so could this other concept. But I think this other concept, they're both tightly wound, but I think it's so tightly wound to the debate topic at hand. I think it's a nice little cherry on top, at least as a introduction to it. That would be my 2 cents.
Cool. Tucker, any thoughts one way or the other?
I kind of think we need to talk about the near-death experience as part of the debate that they left out. And then maybe once that's addressed, it would make sense to have a debate like they did, but including that as part of it.
Yeah.
I think we can have that similar debate and include that and have that actually expand upon what they did.
And now I'm literally right down the middle. So John, you have to break the tie here.
I know.
Literally right down. I could go either way.
Let's talk about that article. First of all, like, really well done. It's a long read. I think that's the intent. It's a nice contrast to just the quick bites, headline stuff. The opening paragraph is a teaser that doesn't pay off until, the end. I mean, there's a lot of work that the particular author, I think it's worth mentioning their name because they did a really good job. Who is it? Alex Blasdell. Talking about a particular patient one is the name that they gave. Patient one was somebody who, was on life support and some weird shit happened with their brain when they were taken off life support. But you don't really find out the details until you read through to the end. And it was great because there was a lot of references to to science, people sciencing it, people researching near-death experiences from, I think, all the way back into the 60s. So really well done article. Definitely we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Actually, as I'm scanning through here, there's even references to the 1700s. So it really goes back. It was really interesting. But yeah, so Bob, do you mind sharing again? Like you thought there was a specific reason they didn't even breach the idea of near-death experiences in the
Yeah.
debate?
Yeah, going back to what we were talking, or excuse me, what you led us off with, John, which was the replication crisis. I mean, it goes to the heart of this. And what is science? Like, is this science? So I think we're going to have an explosion of data because people are not dying from the same things, meaning people are being saved and recovered. And so all of our data points prior to, say, MRIs and stuff, all of our data points were testimonials from a selection of survivors. So obviously all the ones who did not have a near-death experience, they just had a death experience. We do not have testimony. Okay, so and then obviously, things like life support and modern, intervention, CPR, all these things can now prolong a gray area of not quite alive, not quite dead. And so we get to the definition. What is death? Well, back in the day, as soon as you clutched your chest and fell over, that was your dead. Nowadays, that's just the beginning, especially if you fall over into a snowbank or something and you're cold. So there's many different ways to look at the current, quote, air quotes, science of the thing, but that's not the same as what the panelists were talking about in the Holmgren debate. They were very much touching this live wire of maybe it's not how we see it is. Maybe the world is just a shadow world and all this. And that's a very fine line to walk if you're a scientist. So I think adding in the near-death component where it's now is heaven or hell or it's afterlife or it's whatever, I think that's a little too woo-woo for it to be acceptable in their very professional level discussion.
Yeah, it's almost like they would need a fourth person who's really been an expert in that field in the way that Tanya was in other words, like maybe they didn't have Tanya, they had a near-death experience person, and then they wouldn't have brought up the inner homunculus, the topomancy, because they didn't have someone to really speak to that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me that they're just like, let's not even go there, maybe. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I pulled up this piece in the article. It was a young doctor attempting to revive people through CPR in the mid-1980s. Senior physicians would often step in to declare the patient's dead. At a certain point, they would just say, "Okay, that's enough. Let's stop. This is unsuccessful. Yeah. Time of death, 1:37 p.m." And this person recalled, like, that would be the last thing. But one of the things running through their mind, this person, Lance Becker, I guess maybe it was his name, but he says one of the things running through my mind as a young doctor was like, well, what really happened at 1:37? It's not like that's just the time that the senior, doctor, the senior physician came in and declared it. But it's not like the person died because the declaration was made. They were attempting to revive the person. So that's another thing that was so interesting is multiple the journalists.
It's a semantic game. What is death, right? It's when the guy says it's dead in 1:37, that means death, and that's not really what means death,
right?
But humans,
because there was
what we call death is when the doctor says you're dead.
Right, which what is that exactly happening there? Because there's these multiple cases of people's. At some point, they said like it's when the heart stops pumping blood, I think, is kind of maybe the common or current indication of when death happens. But there's multiple cases where the heart hasn't been beating for like 6 hours and someone's revived and they're fine. So what's that about? You know what I mean?
Well, I think our medical definition of death doesn't necessarily do it justice. The instantaneous destruction of the brain, that's death. A sniper rifle shot to the head, an elephant stepping on your head. That's you can definitively say that person died at that moment. Other than the instantaneous destruction of the brain, I think it's not an on-off switch. It's a process that we're just beginning to understand what happens to the brain when the heart stops pumping. It doesn't shut off that instant. There's a flurry of electrical activity, and I'm sure at a chemical level of neurotransmitters and endorphins, and I have read that there's even a surge in your brain creates its own DMT at the time of death.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard or read that as well.
Yes.
So there's definitely, it's not an on-off switch. It's and we don't fully, I would say we don't come even close to understanding what happens when the brain is actually dying.
Yeah. What are you guys' thoughts about, there's countless, I instances, cases, I guess, of people's near-death experiences being about going through a tunnel, right? Like towards the light, something very similar to that description of a tunnel. And at some point I read that somebody was wondering if it was the brain reliving the birthing process through the birth canal. Have you guys heard that before?
Yes.
And what are your thoughts? See, so what's interesting to me is like that seems like it would be an easy one to start gathering data, because not every human is born through the birth canal. I was a C-section baby, so in other words, like if I had,
I never thought about it that way. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, if I had a near-death experience where I visualized the tunnel, which that's a different story for a different episode, I suppose. Anyway, if I did, it almost seems like that would potentially disprove that theory altogether. I don't have that experience in my life. I wasn't delivered through the birth canal. I was pulled out of the womb because I was, C-section, that whole process. So that seems like if nobody's looking to gather that kind of data, there's an opportunity there just to, in other words, if thousands of data points were collected and no near-death experience from a C-section baby related to this tunnel thing, and the only tunnel experiences were birth things, well, that would be really interesting.
That's very cool. You could probably go after the fact and look this up, like right now, because if people have made a declaration of near-death experience or not, they're on the record, and everybody's on the record for vaginal birth versus C-section birth. So you could then go back and check on all the people who have made these claims and do a statistical analysis. I think it's a very cool predictive proposition there.
Yeah.
And
again, my energy is more focused on the haiku side. So anybody listening who's like, that's my speed, I want to do that, please hit us up. We'd love to hear how that goes.
A lot of primary research there. That's
good. Yeah. I would have to argue, though, Daigle, that you still had that same birthing process. It was just through a man-made tunnel.
Yeah. Okay. There was. You're right. Yeah. There was a before inside this comfy womb thing.
Darkness.
Darkness, more or less, and then some opening, some door I went through.
You were pulled into the light as opposed to pushed into the light.
I got it. Here's the differential. People born at night without electricity.
Ooh.
Because then you're going to be, whatever hole you come out of, it's going to be dark out.
Dark anyway.
Yeah, it's dark anyway. So like a hunter-gatherer society where you have true darkness, no artificial lights, and then people get born at night all the time, I'm sure. And then to find out, because half the time is night, half the time is day, like what percentage? I don't know. I think it's just an interesting way to potentially test. I like it.
Yeah.
But let me flip it around and look at the positive side of this metaphor that's building, and I really like the octopus tentacles, and it goes back to the radio receiver versus the signal, meaning you're in a disparate piece of a whole that is unacknowledged until your death. And so because how would you be able, like, let's say it's just it's like a one-way street. Okay, how do you ever know what's at the end such that you can tell the guy behind you? Because once you get there, you can't go back and tell them. So it becomes like this really interesting phenomenon where it might certainly be true. Let's just say, let's throw another example. You got a pond and there's a bunch of dragonfly larvae in the pond, and they're floating around, killing things, eating things. And one day, one of them kind of goes up to the surface and disappears. And the other ones are looking around like, what happened to Jimmy? Where'd he go? And then another day, Jill goes up and then she disappears. Obviously, there's a transition point, a dimensional barrier between the pond itself and the air that the dragonfly emerges into. And it's a one-way street until the dragonfly goes back and lays an egg. But that's not my point. My point is, when you're the larval stage, you cannot conceive of, like, you're an egg and you can conceive of that, and you're a larvae, we're all here right now. But then people disappear, and I can't explain it. But the reality is, from our point of view, they don't disappear and die. They change into a dragonfly, grow wings, or emerge with wings, and then they fly away. And so I love this concept of radio and signal. And so this goes back to the tunnel. So you're flying back you're going back to the pond or whatever. I don't know. I mean, you're transitioning through a dimensional barrier that is a one-way street. And now here's where it gets interesting. We're pulling them back. So like I said, the tiger starts to eat you, you go into a shock, you die, you're consumed. You don't ever get to come back from that and tell everybody how it was, right? It might be, this exactly what everybody else was saying, but nobody else ever came back and told us. But now we're getting the testimony. Now we're getting people who are like nymph, and they go up above, but then they sink back down. They're like, I swear I saw this. I swear there's this giant ball of fire in the sky. And they're like, what's fire? Anyway, the point would be, we might be able to gather information now. And I don't believe this, but it's possible. It's possible that we could be gathering information from a bit on the other side of that dimensional divide and then coming back again. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and when you talk about the near-death experiences, and you brought up the whole, with the people born at night. Well, I would be curious to know, like, if somebody 500 years ago was born at night and had a near-death experience, would they describe not a bright light, but a warm orange one? Because the only light that they would have experienced being born would be fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there is something there, but obviously these are all testimonials. So this becomes the smudgy part where it's hard to really do true science when everything is a testimonial and a subjective experience. Because how are you going to replicate that? Are you going to do a control? All this stuff. I mean, this is where we get to the point of, I think it becomes an artificial consciousness that we can have this conversation with, or an animal model that's not human that we can study with high-end MRIs or something like that.
Yeah.
And the weird thing to me is, when you're dealing with something like the brain and you're scanning it with different instruments, is there a point where those tools you're using to scan the brain are influencing it? Where you're
the observer effect.
Exactly. Are you changing what is happening by watching it happen?
Yeah.
By the way, they have a transcranial magnetic stimulation right now. You can do this to yourself, where you put magnets on your skull and you can change things about how you feel. It's really an interesting study. I think, Tucker, you'll appreciate this. They put novice, completely brand new people on a video game, and I think it was a military simulator game, literally like the Marine Corps trains on this thing. It's hyper realistic. They put random people on and check their KD ratio or whatever. Then they gave them this transcranial magnetic stimulation and let them play again, and they got into flow state, and they did like 10x, like an order of magnitude better. Wow. And so there's these interesting effects that are perceived. We don't know what the causation is, but these effects that are perceived through, by the way, magnetism is electricity. Electricity is magnetism. They are the same thing. They're just in different angles, so to speak. But it's exactly the same thing. There is no magnetism without electricity. There's no electricity without magnetism. So it does impact our brain. So if we were to scan our brains with giant magnets, man, I don't know what's happening. I mean, it's not the same kind of thing as what the transcranial magnetism is. Like an MRI is not the same machine, but it does bring up the point of how do you observe something without influencing it. I like that.
Yeah. Very interesting. One last thing, and just to go back to the testimonial problem you mentioned in the article on near-death experiences, really well done again, writing specifically this point that I've heard this account in various places about, a person, on the operating table or something, near-death experience. She floated up out of her body. She could see out from outside the hospital or whatever. She could see like a shoe on a windowsill. You got that sound familiar? Like something that she could have not had any.
That story. Yes.
Yeah, and I know I've heard that before, and it was like, wow. Because then later a nurse went and found it and was like, oh wow, and it was really there. Wow, 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 wow. Well, good job on the person writing the article, because they just very plainly laid it out. Like, that relies on the testimony of the nurse. Like
Totally.
And
by the way, you would never hear about the nurse if she did not find the shoe. So she's now incorporated herself into the narrative, meaning subconsciously. I'm not saying she's lying, is my point.
Sure.
She's not, but you could have a self-fulfilling prophecy by being persuaded by the girl who woke up and said, I remember. There was and by the way, she might have walked for 2 days looking for this friggin' shit.
Sure. Yeah.
How many windowsills are in a giant hospital?
Yeah, right.
I don't know. And so
it was just
Well, and I remember, I mean, this was probably 20 years ago, and it was probably a show like 2020 or something like that. But they did an episode on near-death experiencers, and there was one hospital that actually put like one of those red LED signs on top of like a freezer or something in the operating room, and so it's facing the ceiling, and the only way you'd be able to see it is if you were up above it, right? And I believe they had at least one case where somebody, said, I saw the message on the LED sign on top of the freezer. But once again, that's also just the testimonial, because you can't tell me that there isn't a nurse somewhere in that hospital who wouldn't have gone up to that bedside and gone, did you see the welcome to heaven sign on top of the freezer?
Yeah, exactly. I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was a nice dose to read the way that the author put that in there. I felt like a nice healthy dose of skepticism that I was lacking prior, that I was like,
this goes back to the debate, meaning why did they not include this as a point of evidence in the debate? I think it's so fuzzy to become easily misconstrued, easily manipulated. These are vulnerable people. This is, a really critical time in their recovery. I mean, it's dark, man. It's really dark to play off of this concept of, did you get the answer right? I mean, it's an off-putting thing to me to test somebody in this moment. I guess the flip side, let's go back also to the debate where Anil started with general anesthesia.
Yeah.
And I believe the article mentions ketamine.
Yeah.
And so my wife is a veterinarian. I sent her the article. We had conversations, and she told me many stories. She uses ketamine, not personally. She uses it on animals, of course.
Yeah.
She told me how the animals react and how they are not unconscious, but they don't perceive anything. They are literally in a dissociative state such that the pain exists, but it is not consciously aware of pain. Yeah. So you have two things. One is the signal of pain, and the second is the awareness of the pain. I'm going to kick back to that Floyd song, Comfortably Numb.
Oh, okay? Yeah.
You can be aware that you are in pain and not experience pain. You can have a sense that you are not the thing that's in pain. You are above it. You are floating out of it. You are not contained within it, but you have the knowledge of it. This is where it gets real spooky. And this is where, I'm open to the evidence and see where it goes, because I think we're in a revolutionary area where we can now not kill people, but give them a heroic dose of ketamine, and then ask them afterwards what happened, and then do this as a experimental thing. Obviously, we can't put people near death, but here's another factor: is simulate death with a dissociative drug.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting.
But do it in mass, like 100,000 people, and then try to survey that and really dig down in a clinical setting. I'm not talking about like, at a party or something. I'm talking
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
really
For science.
for science. Yes, like a shaman, a guided experience. You're not doing this on your couch.
Right.
We're doing this, and I think there's something.
I'll sign
there.
up for that. I'll try it.
I would too, honestly. I think this is the coolest part, because we might have talked about this off recording. I can't recall. I've been under general anesthesia. It was weird. It was propofol. Like I was just gone, and then I was back again. And so I don't know if we recorded that, but it was weird, man. It was weird to go out in one room and to come in another room and not have any gaps. It was
and someone goes, that was 5 hours ago, or whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It was the same experience for me. You're laying on a table one moment, and the next thing you know, somebody's trying to shove a cracker in your face. Like, eat something. You're like, wait, what?
And it's unexplainable. It's unexplainable.
I didn't want a cracker. I just wanted to keep taking that awesome nap.
But you can't logically work your way through it. It does not make sense to turn off, because when you sleep, you don't even turn off.
No.
And so this is not sleep. This is not alive. It's like death. I mean, it really is. Now to his point, I think there's this is where we got to get interesting. There's no cognitive flow in that period, but when you're in the near-death experience, you do have recollections. You do have, they almost always say your life flashes before you. You get to see a summation of your entire, like you're falling off a 20-story building, right? On the way down, time dilates such that everything feels like it slows. And you have this, maybe 1.5 second fall, but in that 1.5 second, you go through, you're born, you slapped on the ass, first hug, first kiss, first this, right? And then you go through your whole life, and then all of a sudden you hit the ground and everything's gone. It's different than the propofol in that something is happening there. Plus the MRIs of patient one, as these people are passing, they're not coming back, maybe their brain is not just gone. There's, like Trucker was saying, there's additional stimulation, there's additional neurotransmitters, there's additional electrical activity in some of these areas. So what could, maybe is DMT. So what could be experienced in that moment, that's still a secret.
Yeah. For how long is going to be a secret? In our lifetimes, do you think you guys think in our lifetimes?
I think there, and like I said, we've proven this wrong many times throughout human history, but I think there are some answers that we just will never get.
Yeah. I'd be willing to say, like, at least, I believe, like, in our lifetime, I think we'll get close, but I don't know if in my lifetime the actual answers. I'm hesitant to say never, but maybe it's hundreds of generations. You know what I mean? It's, we'll get into this in future episodes. You guys know what I'm gonna, but like cryo freezing. The idea of like putting someone in a suspended state for hundreds of years and then bringing them back.
It's like a physical propofol or something, like getting somebody into this like this middle zone of not alive, not dead. I think that's it. Also, number two, and you talked about this before, John, you get brought back after 6 hours now.
Yeah.
What happens when it's 16 hours and then it's 60 hours? And where's the limit?
Yeah.
What happens when it's 600 hours and your brain is just like, where's the limit? Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's going to be an interesting line to draw. Is there a line there? I don't know. I'm
not a huge baseball fan, but I believe what I'm about to say is accurate. Like Ted Williams, the name sound familiar? I think.
Oh yeah. Baseball.
Yeah. Didn't he, part of his dying wishes or whatever was to have his
head was
brain
cut off.
or head preserved?
Yeah, you're right. Ted Williams' head was frozen. You're absolutely right. That's exactly right.
And maybe it's too little too late or whatever. At the time the technology wasn't there, but what if that is, I'm dancing around this topic that will come up in future episodes about the three body problem, right?
Yeah.
But this idea that well, if consciousness is just in the brain and we could take the brain out and freeze it and then wake it up and
Well,
the
I'm looking
consciousness would
at,
still be there, like,
I think
wow.
it's the right metaphor, but I'm looking at it a different way, which is, let's say it is true that consciousness is in the brain alone. When you are in the stasis and you're unable to experience your own consciousness, which is trapped in the physicality of your brain in stasis, where does it go? Like, is it literally like, here's what I imagine: tapes, meaning like cassette tapes. So you could have a cassette tape, and on that cassette tape, when you're playing, it's playing music. But when you turn it off, all that film or whatever, a magnetic tape, is just rolled up on the thing. And if you put it back in the tape player a week from now, you press play, it's just going to pick up right where it was. But it's like always on there. It's like the whole thing's in there. And if you took a giant magnet, you could erase it, because you're literally just imprinting, magnetic signal inside the tape itself.
Yeah.
So it seems like the stasis, or the ability to put people into a unconscious state, would be vastly improved in the future, and it would be greatly diagnostic to uncovering the root of consciousness.
Right. I just believe some of that is going to happen in our lifetimes. I don't think we'll get final answers, but 20 years, 30 years, I think it'll be really cool.
I do like the whole tape concept more than I like the radio concept, because that's the thing with anesthesia, is it turns you off, so it stops the tape. If you look at it from the radio, the radio's still playing somewhere, which is not the case.
The broadcast is still broadcasting.
Yeah,
I like that.
And that's not the case with anesthesia. That broadcast is gone.
You're on pause. You're on pause right now.
Yeah.
But then let me throw something else out here. This is one thing that's kind of bothered me for many years, and I'll bring it up now because it seems apropos. It was some kind of YouTube clip. It's a terrible thing, by the way, trigger warning. This guy was this father was confronting his wife and her boyfriend or something. He was trying to pick up his kids. It was his weekend or whatever, and they're arguing on the porch. And the one guy, the biological dad, is a big guy, and the boyfriend is a little guy. The little guy runs in the house, comes back with a rifle, and they're arguing, and they're really heated. And the big guy kind of pushes this guy around, tries to grab the rifle barrel thing, and this guy backs up and pops him twice in the chest. And this guy just drops, like someone, not in the head, in the heart, right in the center of mass. And he just drops, does not move. And it's not even a rifle, by the way. It's like a pistol in a rifle body. So it makes like this little tiny, almost like a firecracker, pop up. And the lady who was the wife, she didn't even realize, she thought it was fake or something. Like, she thought it was an air gun. And so my point is, nobody reacts to this guy, so they just let him be. And my point is, he doesn't twitch, he doesn't move, he doesn't make a sound. But what I think happened is his heart just got obliterated, his blood pressure dropped, and the light got turned out. Now his brain is still there. And what has haunted me is what's going through this man's brain for the next 20 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking BP is zero, effectively. Your brain is consuming its last stores of energy and oxygen and trying to expel its waste products, and it's not going anywhere. And maybe DMT and all this other stuff have been taught. Something's happening in this moment that it's irrevocable for this person. But I feel like the brain is not destroyed, but there's no outward awakeness. What is on the inside? Yeah. What is the experiential? What is it like to die? Is what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Your head is not crushed, but you have zero BP. You're not able to signal your body. You're not feeling your body anymore. This is my theory.
Yeah.
You're totally in your virtual world. You're totally in the dream state, and you might experience childhood or this moment of seeing the light and all this stuff, right? Like that's what I'm desiring, the information of the seeing the light. I don't think it's a coincidence. So many people describe it, your light flashing before your eyes. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think I think the feeling of being able to watch yourself, this dissociative property, I think that's so common as to be true to the subjective person. It's not true maybe objectively, but subjectively, like you can feel like you're looking down on yourself. I think all these things are going to be explored.
Yeah. It made me think of the guillotine from
Good point.
hundreds of years ago or whatever that I've read about, heard about, that, I don't know if it was every single case, but multiple cases where the head is severed from the body, but the eyes are moving, there's still things that are happening for 20 seconds or whatever. And
that popped into my mind, the samurai execution.
Seppuku. Seppuku? Is that what it is? Yes.
That's suicide. That's different. That's where you cut your guts open. I'm talking about
and then somebody decapitates you, and the idea, I mean, this is what I heard is you cut your guts open, but you leave your hands in a way to catch your head. The idea, the full ceremony would be having, I think, someone else cut your head off, but that it would fall. Yeah. It would fall into your hands in a way that you could look back at your body in your last, dying seconds. Yeah.
That's hardcore.
Fucking, that's hardcore.
That's way hardcore.
Yeah.
but I think the reality is something is happening here. Like it's something's happening here. It's not just, it's complicated, right? There's something happening here. It's unexplained, but it's demonstrably pertinent to the human condition and throughout cultures and all times and probably to animals as well. I mean, I hate to feel like this, but it's got to feel like something to die as an animal as well.
Sure.
We should take concern into what we're doing, obviously, as humans, meaning domesticating living creatures that have consciousness, have feelings.
Yeah.
They're going to have this as well. And so I think it's a big, big question to ask.
Yeah. Obligatory contact tie-in, that line about it's hard to kill something once it lets you see its consciousness,
Oof. Oof. Yes. And what's that lady, Temple Grandin, right?
Right.
Design slaughterhouses to be more compassionate, meaning
right.
to not get them fearful. So you don't have fear before you're led to your death. And that's a gift, obviously.
Right. So I think it's probably a good time to wrap up here. I think what we could do is just some final thoughts about the debate and the tone in particular, because and then we can kind of tease what we'll, let's plan this next episode. But we mentioned in the very beginning when we start talking about this debate that the moderator made a point to say generally in a 3-person debate, there's the 3 sides are the defender of the faith, the person that's, I'm here to say this is what we believe is true and I'm going to defend it. There's the counter argument, which is the heretic saying, no, that's not right. And then the third piece is the social democrat who's in between. And for this particular debate, he says, we're not doing that. All 3 of these people are heretics. And, a comment that I think we all made over text when, Tucker, I think you're the one that found this first, was how, I'm drawing a blank on the adjective, refreshing and polite, cordial. The tone of the debate was.
It was a pleasant experience. It was.
There's no hollering and shit talking. There's no you're an idiot. Throughout all the disagreements, clear. It was clear that there was 3 unique points of views here, but nobody ever was, disagreed with in a asshole-ish manner. It was very respectable disagreements and productive, disagreements. In fact, take an opportunity here to say again, one of the things Anil says, the beauty of science is the ability to be productively wrong, so that our collective understanding always ratchets upwards. And I thought that the whole debate encompassed that beautifully. Everyone was being, vulnerable,
good faith.
To be willing to be productively wrong. So I thought that was interesting. I thought we just chat a little bit about that kind of format. And
how hard is it to even find let's just
3 heretics?
Well, no, I was gonna say just someone who's non-dogmatic. So even if you're a heretic, you're not dogmatically a heretic. This is a finer point to the major point, which is, that they were pleasant to each other. By the way, I think 2 of the 3 were British, so there you go. That might be a thing.
Sure.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
the cultural, right? The moderator was British as well. So,
Right.
so I think we get into this adversarial, flame war, trolls, and trying to
Destroy the opponent.
Well,
I'm gonna destroy you.
here's what the image I have. It's not that it's a metaphor, but the metaphor is one of these YouTubers who's just trying to provoke a response. They're annoying, and they're just trying to annoy you just so you flip out because their friends over there recording you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's half of what people are trying to do right now. That's not a debate. They're just trying to provoke the other person so you get upset,
I don't think that's helpful. I'm not a fan of that myself.
That's why this was so refreshing and beneficial to look at it as not anything to do with the topic at hand, but at the composition of the conversation. And it really has driven me to appreciate and explore and be aware of, what role do I play in a conversation? Am I the heretic? Am I the defender of the faith? Am I the social democrat? It's a really cool way to put yourself into the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And then also to be able to change your point of view, your mind's eye, your subjective feeling, so that you can change roles. And that is hyper beneficial. This goes back to the dogmatic side. Dogmatic side will not relinquish their position. They are intransigent. They're stuck. They have to. They can't even do a devil's advocate or look at it through someone else's point of view. And then you get into this like trench warfare. No progress is made. We're just sniping each other across 100 yards, and none of the lines ever move. None of them. And so what's the benefit of listening to these conversations and debates? So it's really about persuasion and discovery of truth, I hope. Progress.
Yeah. So in the next episode, I think we have this idea here that we can try to maybe approach. But by the way, I would say I think thus far, I think the 3 of us have done exactly what you said, Bob. I think we've morphed through all 3 roles. None of the 3 of us are so dogmatic like that we've just stuck by this is my point, period. I think we've done a really good job flowing in and out of the defender of the faith, the heretic, the social democrat. And I think we're kind of considering, maybe for the sake of science, right? Let's try a sort of mock debate or whatever, where we are kind of assigned these roles to try to stick to. I'm game for it. I think it'll be fun, again, for the sake of just trying it, because I don't think it's necessarily been in our nature so far to assume the single role. So I think
it's like an intentional thing versus what it was natural is for us to naturally shift depending upon topics.
Right. Yeah. So I think this will be fun. So the topic itself will be, continuing the conscious, subconscious stuff, but it is something that, Bob, that you came up with, and I think it might have been hinted at in some of the call-in episodes that are, we're releasing those when we aren't able to record a new episode. So this might already be out there, but I think in small doses, and certainly not from a 3-person type of debate issue. But this idea about the difference between consciousness and subconsciousness, and these 4 specific factors, and kind of binary type of thing, opposing things, pendulum swinging from one to the other. I love how you laid it out. So I'll just kind of give those factors just as a teaser, but I don't want to get too much into the actual details now, if that's okay.
I think we should leave it for next time. Yes.
Yeah. So what I'll say is, so consciousness, it's like a subjective point of view, deductive reasoning, forward directionality of thought, semantic memory. Whereas subconscious now, objective point of view, inductive reasoning, backward directionality of thought, episodic memory. So I love the framing of that, and I think it'll be really fun for us to sort of attack it with intention of this, because I think, Bob, you even said like it's kind of your idea. So defender of the faith, Tucker's a natural heretic, but and then I feel like I am kind of natural sort of social democrat in between, Team America, World Police. I believe we could all get along. We could all talk, So I think it's
bridge builder. I say bridge
builder. Okay, yeah. So I'm excited about digging into that next time. I think it'll be super fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah. So right on. So look forward to that. And in the meantime, feel free to leave us a review if you're enjoying this. You can contact us, sendingpoets@gmail.com. Thanks guys. I love the conversation. Any final parting words before we sign off here?
I think it relates to the whole consciousness and the defender of the faith and the heretic, but it's like I believe we're all, who we are is based on how much new information we take in. And I think it's important to never reach a spot in life where you go, I know the truth, I'm done entertaining new ideas. Got to keep growing.
Yeah. Well said.
I like that. I'll just add on cherry on top. The flexibility of role playing different intellectual points of view is vastly underrated. To not be able to role play rigorously makes one brittle of thought and susceptible for being fragile and breaking. And so we're probably stuck in the worst, because of the information age, we're stuck in the worst case scenario where we have the most information at hand, to Tucker's point, but the least absorption if it differs from one's pre-existing point of view.
Yeah, interesting.
So experience new things, experience countervailing concepts, experience outside of one's comfort zone it's probably that's probably the metaphorical fountain of youth. So to prevent this fragility and this calcification of position and ideology, you have to aggressively listen to other people and aggressively go towards the things that oppose you, the ideas that oppose your inherent point of view. And through that, you reach to the growth and change. And so that's, I think, the heart of what we're doing here, obviously, as poets, opining upon the beauty of the universe and each other, is we're trying to be flexible, meaning you, me, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth every week. It's the journey. That is the thing. Like, where we get, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. The whole thing is about becoming plastic with your intellect, being able to see the patterns that are true and not the ones you want to be true. That is where we are at. We are at the point of, it's uncomfortable to be pushed back on intellectually. It's uncomfortable to possess an idea as if its identity is my identity. The idea is not my identity. The idea is the idea. And so to not be able to differentiate from someone's idea and from the person themselves is also holding us back as a society, where so much is wrapped up in what we say that how could I ever take the other point of view? What would people think of me? How could I ever argue this terrible thing is a good thing? When obviously, air quotes, it's a terrible thing. It can never be, there's no bright side to it. There's no positive side to it. So take home message, the plane of the ideas, putting on other people's shoes, walking around in them. That's the thing. That's the place you got to go to, regardless of your position. You got to put the other guy's shoes on and walk around a little bit.
Beautiful.
I agree.
Love it. My takeaway is I'm going to go convince Kim to do some role playing. Hell yeah.
Hey!
Let's go. Anyway, yeah, no, well said. I love it, Bob. Thank you. Yeah. Right on. All right. Well, yeah, thank you for listening. And don't forget John Adams' wonderful words. You will never be alone with a poet in your pocket.